And welcome to the second to last council meeting for the year. The next full council is on the 13th of December, where we'll be wrapping up for 2018. Welcome everybody, welcome the public here this morning, and to those that are listening to the live screening. Also, I've had a request from one councillor to keep his phone on at the desk, and that's absolutely fine, and I really appreciate you asking, because we understand the circumstances that surround individual councillors every now and then. Thank you. And I will ask Councillor Donaldson to open with the karakia, please.
E ino tātou. E te atua kaharawa ko koe te tohu rangatira, te tohu mataranga. Manakitia mai mātou o pōnonga I tēnei rā, e mahi nei I a mātou mahi, mō te painga o ngā tangata o te kaunihera o Rotorua. Takua mai kia tau te rangimari ei, ki runga I a mātou I ngā wā katoa, ko ihu karaiti hoki tō mātou ariki. Amini. And because we're this bilingual city, Almighty God, who alone is the leader of all mankind and the fountain of all knowledge, send thy blessing upon us, your servants, this day, as we strive to do all things good for the betterment of the people of the Rotorua district. May we be tolerant in ourselves at all times, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Thank you. I now ask for any apologies, and I have one noted for Councillor Maxwell, who is in China at our sister city on my behalf. I was asked to present a paper, and so he is doing that on my behalf. Councillor Stewart?
Just to elaborate on that, Councillor Maxwell, who's our cultural ambassador, as she said, is attending an international tourism conference representing the Rotorua Council in China, to save any costs of Official Information Act requests and or letters to the editor, just to advise that Councillor Maxwell is paying for the trip fully himself at no cost to the ratepayers of Rotorua.
Thank you for that clarification. Councillor Rotorua.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If possible, I'd like to leave shortly before 11, if possible, to attend a funeral. Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Also attending Bobby Thompson's funeral as well.
And that's very appropriate as the leader of the Sports and Recreation portfolio, and could you pass on our regards to the family, please? Big loss. Are there any declarations of interest? Pardon? I need a mover and a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Gould. Seconded, Councillor Hunt. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary carried. Are there any declarations of interest? All right, there appear to be none. Welcome to those here today for other meetings. You're welcome to watch our council meeting. Are there any urgent items not on the agenda? Councillor Gould.
Madam Chair, I'd like to request a paper coming through the OMM meeting next February on the Mamaku sewage issue, as I attended a meeting on the 4th of November, and there's a lot of misrepresentation by the residents up there, and it's a case of, for this full council to be aware of what the issues are involved, the length of time and what options can be taken.
Well, it's not an urgent item, it's an ongoing operational that I think Stavros Michael would cover off in his report, but would note that you want included in his report an update on Mamaku. Thank you. There's no need to respond really, because we go into discussion about what the issues are. I think you know that you can always go and talk to Stavros, the door's open. But I think we do need matters clarified. We're all aware of that. Councillor Sturt.
As Chair of Operations and Monitoring, I support Council Gould's request, in Stavros's report, can he liaise with and get the correct information from Environment Bay of Plenty, because the confusion is just unbelievable in Mamaku.
Councillor Kumar, is it in relation to Mamaku or another item?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just wondering, it's probably not urgent at the moment, but maybe sometime next year if we could have the staff look at something that's come up in the papers today about the begging issue and the bylaw what Tauranga had introduced. So sometime if we could discuss that, so there's a bit more clarity. I think we need to probably once again separate the two issues of begging and homelessness. It seems to have been bundled in one. So.
To another council's decisions, but the way that we approach the strategy should be included in a report. Thank you. All right, we move now to confirmation of council minutes of the 25th of October on page 7 of your order paper. Do I have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Kent. Seconder, Councillor Gould. You're quick off the mark, Councillor Gould. That the minutes of the council meeting held on the 25th of October 2018 be confirmed as a true and accurate record and correct record. Are there any corrections? There appear to be none. I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, carried. Release of confidential items, page 14, that the report confidential items be released. Thank you, Second, Councillor Gould. This is only information, so there is no need for clarification. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, carried. Now we move to item 6.1, the petition to stop the lakefront development. Ask the petitioner, good morning, to the table. And I understand that you're very clear on the process, so good morning.
Thank you. Inga mana, inga waka, inga haui wha, tēnā koutou, tēnā mai tātou anō. It's good to be back, and thank you for hearing this petition. Now, I'll move very quickly because of the time limit. The lakefront, I want to talk about the origins, the context of the petition, to understand, so you can make sense of why we put the petition together. Back on the 8th of March, advisory group discussion got rather heated, recall, when it was felt by some councillors there was little local involvement. The lakefront $58 million development was up for consultation of the long-term plan process. But on the 19th of March, quite quickly, there was a response by people in the public saying, please consult better over the lakefront spending plans. Now these lines, these words are not mine, they are headlines from the Rotorua Daily Post, so they can be regarded as fairly neutral, commentary, if you will, on the events at the time. The Lakefront Advisory Group got approval from the Lakes Council. It was to be, at that time, considered to be a CCO and to cost $250K times 3 years. Now, a couple of months later, the government then announced funding for the lakefront and forest projects from the PGF. And the long-term consultations were very interesting because they threw up 278 people supported, but 243 opposed. That is a ratio of 53% versus 43% in support, which it's a line ball decision. The degree of support was marginal. But it was very clear that Pukurua Lakefront Holdings Limited was going to be developing the area in collaboration with senior officials of this council. A week later or so, Ngāti Whakaui met and they endorsed the lakefront redevelopment plans. But they had privileged access to that information, and that in time generated resistance. The headlines went on, and at the end of July, It was a very important letter in my view, which basically said that questioning the council's approach to all this is the right thing to do. There was considerable public disquiet. Now, the controversy didn't go away, it just got more intense. On the 10th of August, the first concept plans were revealed. They were, in my view, pretty skinny. But then that triggered a response from the public. It works well as it is. The priorities need rethinking. And then, when one councillor expressed a view, another councillor attacked that person. So we started to get controversy at a number of different levels. There was an opinion expressed early September, or mid-September, the lakefront does need a better building to replace the QE. And the Daily Post then openly asked the question of citizens, what do you think of the lakefront redevelopments? And a strong opinion that came through on the 29th of September was that the council should focus on needs projects rather than wants. And I've got to stress again, these are not my words, these are direct headlines from the Daily Post. The other thing I've got to stress is the letters, that there was a flurry of letters at this time and subsequently, and it was claimed publicly that these were indeed all jack-ups from RDRR. That's not true. Well over half the letters that were published were for non-RDRR members. They are citizens giving expression to their concerns. And it's in that context, on the 4th of October, we launched our petition to test support for the lakefront development and for the proposal that it might be smart for us to stop, rethink the proposal. It was immediately announced by one councillor it wouldn't matter a damn if we did collect signatures because it wouldn't stop the development. That was seen as quite offensive, but it had a very important effect. There was an immediate flurry of more letters asking for bigger priorities to be considered. Regarding the spending is staggering. Where do I sign? Please stop. The lakefront isn't broken. There was an attempt to table a petition, but the process was denied tabling. So we then went back to collecting signatures, and there was other headlines, as you can see at the bottom of the page there, to and froing on the whole matter of whether or not the redevelopment should go ahead as it is. So my point to this point is that there was continuing controversy. Now, what did we find? The petition outcomes are pretty straightforward. We had 800 odd signatures by the 25th of October. I've got more here, which more or less doubles the numbers we've collected by the 22nd of November. We set no target because no target seemed to be enough for some people. So we simply collected, but we also noticed that whenever we asked people if they wished to sign, and we showed them the council pamphlet and map.
Dr. McPherson, your time is up.
Then
you
what I'll do, then I'll have
5 minutes.
Then I'll quickly indicate the frequent comments that were made by people.
Point of order, Madam Chair. Point of order.
order.
Yes, I'd like to ask you to rule in terms of Standing Order 16.2. The chairperson must terminate the presentation of the petition if he or she believes the petitioner is being disrespectful, offensive, or making malicious statements. Point 4 up there, the word aristocracy in particular, I find offensive not only to myself but to people in this room and a large number of our community. I think that's, I'd ask you to rule.
And I will also, that is definitely an offensive comment, and we take offence to that, and therefore I rule that questions are out of order. The time is up. I also thank you for raising that issue. That will have to be dealt with later. Dr. McPherson, we acknowledge the presentation of your petition today, but want to assure you and those that are here today that there are no decisions to be made today. It's simply a receiving of the petition, giving you those 5 minutes. Councillors now need to take time to reflect on what's been presented, which includes all of the comments, and also a summary analysis from our staff. And we will now move, because there's no decision making, we're going to move on to the next item on the agenda.
Point of order, Madam Chair. In the latest booklet, Tātou Tātou Rotorua, we outlined a complete page on the lakefront development. I just wondered, with us waiting to get the information that you say we need to make a considered decision on where to here with the petition, does that have any impact on commitments we've already made in terms of, I know that I signed some tender documents just recently with regard to removal of halls, etc. I just wondered whether that is delayed by this decision today or this action today.
Nothing's delayed. We note and receive the petition. It's an appropriate democratic tool. We receive it, it will be analysed, councillors will consider the comments and also the commentary that now we received on the petition, but the next item of business that we now move on to is the appropriate time for those.
Excuse me, Madam Chair, so may I ask, with the petition, does Dr McPherson, do they get some, first of all, you know, what actually happens with it? I'd like to know.
Yes,
I mean,
is
do
received.
they get a response, or is it just...
No, he gets no response today because we've received it.
Yes.
He stuck to the standing orders about tabling of a petition, is entitled to 5 minutes to speak. The ruling out of order of the comments on point 4 mean that we shut down the opportunity for questions today. But there will be questions in the next item of business and on the 13th. There will be substantial discussion.
Well, when is the opportunity? No, because if we were going to have questions and answers, so...
The chair has the right. I had to terminate the presentation. I believe that the presenter was disrespectful and offensive in making those statements. I have the power as the
I
chair,
appreciate that.
and I'm using that power.
Can I raise a point of order?
No,
Your
you
Worship?
can't.
The
Point of order, Madam Chair.
Point of order.
Came from our signatory. So I present that to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. We move on.
Point of order, Madam Chair.
Yes, certainly.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd just like to raise the issue that if we have the opportunity to question the petition later, Dr McPherson won't be there at that time. I personally believe it would be advantageous to councillors to ask any questions at this point. Whilst I agree with the Chair's ruling in terms of disrespect, I don't see that it would serve any disinterest of the Council to hear limited questions for a short period.
Yeah.
I have made my ruling and I'm going to stick to my ruling. If that offensive remark hadn't have been in there, we could have gone on. Councillor, I've already ruled, so we move on now to the next, which is a presentation on the lakefront development and Whakariwariwa Forest. Item 7, and I ask, it's Portia and Henry, I understand, yes, and Kingy Biddle. Good morning.
Kia ora, Your Worship, and kia ora koutou councillors. And look, as you said, this was just really an opportunity pre-Christmas to give a presentation to councillors to talk about progress with both the forest project and the lakefront project, and to float out and really discuss some of the concepts that are being thought about. So probably in terms of introductions, I'm not sure on my right needs many introductions, but we've got Kingy Biddle, who is the newly elected chair of Te Komiti Nui, or Ngāti Whakaui, and Portia Mackenzie. And I think it's significant having Kingy here really, and really reflects, I think, the underlying basis of both these projects, which are really rooted in partnership. And when we're talking the forest, obviously we're talking about iwi-owned land, owned by CNI iwi on behalf of Tūhorangi and Ngāti Whakaui. So it's fantastic to have the partners here. And when we're talking on the lakefront, we're talking the long tradition around the gifted reserves and the connections of iwi to those places. So what I'm thinking really is we'll go through the presentation, and I think pause after we've been through the forest and open it up for questions and discussion, and then go on to the lakefront. So it's probably a way of just breaking it up. But I'll hand over to Portia and Kingy.
Morena tātou. Today I have some images to take you through around some of the design on Long Mile, on Forest Hub 2, into the Visitors Centre and the play space as well. But some of the work that's been going on in the background with the co-governance group around some of the storytelling and the cultural narrative is really exciting, which is why we've got Kingy here today to take you through some of that. So some of these partnership principles that the governance group have been working on in collaboration with council around how we work together are quite exciting, some of the detail that's coming out of it. So I'm going to hand over to Kingy now to take you through some of that detail.
O tēnā tātou, ka nui te mihi, ko te reo te kainga tēnei e mihi atu nei kia koutou. Firstly, with great respect, I think I need to start with the true iwi stocracy. Ko rangi nui ki runga, ko papatua nuku ki raro. Ko tāne, ko tāwhiri, ko tangaroa. They were the true iwi elite who guide us, who sustain us, who teach us every day. Rotorua is a town of stories. Pūrākau. And not just Rotorua, the township that we see here, with the stories of Hinemoa and Tutanekai, or the stories of the birth of Rotorua. There are stories out at Tarawera. There are stories up at Ngongo Taha. And indeed, there are stories, great stories, to be told out at Whakarewerewa and Tokorangi. Tokorangi is the area that houses the great redwood forest. Now, one of the things that our ancestors, before the arrival of Captain Cook, one of the things our ancestors did before going into the forest was, even before going into the forest, they knew that the forest, we were the guardians of the forest, but the forest didn't belong to us. The forest belonged to Tāne. So even before going into the forest, we would stand and ask Tāne if we could enter the forest. We would tell Tāne what we would do, and we would go into Tāne and get the food we needed to get the medicines we needed to get. And then when we left the forest, we left it cleaner than it was before we entered. Just like you go to somebody's home, you knock on the door and you ask if you can go to their home. And then when you go inside, you meet, you talk, you have a cup of tea, you play on their PlayStation or whatever it is you do. But then when you leave the home, you leave it cleaner than you would before you got there. You also respect the home and you respect the people there. And so with the birth of what we call Te Pā o Tāne, the sanctuary of Tāne is exactly that. Is that when people enter Te Pā o Tāne, normally we go down the Long Mile Road, we're driving down the Long Mile Road here, forest there. But when we enter Te Pā o Tāne, just like we enter Te Pā o Tamatekapua, Te Pā o Tunuhopu, even though we haven't entered the house, indeed we have entered the Pā. So these, to us, it's not just a really awesome concept. It's a returning to the values and to the respect that we have in those days today. So the messages that we teach our whānau when they go into the forest is one of respect, is one of environmental values, is one of cultural values. So just looking on Facebook, I've seen that they've closed down the base camp at the Himalayas. Why? because in essence it's a dump. How would that be if people came and learnt the story of Tāne here in Rotorua? And then when they went up to the Himalayas, they took that experience. Because they haven't learnt it, they see it. That's the opportunity that we have here today. It's not new. And so with this, the actual design concept has a certain wind that blows through it, like the wind that blows through the forest. And those winds are the values, the ha of respect. And also, though, a pa, when you go to a pa, those who live on a pa know that it's home. We feel at home there. So when we go into Te Pā o Tāne, we're made to feel welcome. People feel welcome. And that's why we don't want to have huge, great big buildings there. The buildings too need to reflect the ha, or the wind that blows through there. We have Tāne Whakapiripiri. Tāne Whakapiripiri had many names. You had like AKA would have had it gone to the Justice Department. It changed its names many times. Tāne te wānanga, Tāne the educator. That's an opportunity to teach people about Tāne. Tāne te rūnanga, a great place where people can stop and talk. Tāne te waiora, Tāne who heals. A place where people can stop and talk, because we're not doing that. We have a phone, we talk via the phone. So these are the overlying concepts, the overlying aspects. But the thing is too, is that as we as human beings know, we need to live together. That's what Tātou Tātou is about. Because in Te Pā o Tāne, Tāne isn't the only one that lives there. Tāwhiri Mātea of the wind lives there as well. Tangaroa of the water lives there as well. Rongo Mā Tāne of cultivated food lives there as well. But each of them have a different job. But each of them contribute together to a makatia, just like the story says here in Rotorua, live together for the betterment of the forest. It's like a tuamaka, just like that, a dovetail. These are the stories there are stories we can tell, but there are also those stories we don't have to tell that people learn even more about. That's Te Pā o Tāne. One more word, Te Pā, like this, means to touch. Everything's connected when you go to Te Pā o Tāne. Every single blade of grass, piece of wind or tree that is in the area that we call our catchment has a story. What we are doing are wanting to tell the story of tokorangi and whakarewarewa in a Rotorua way. Our way. So it's with that, I'd like to say tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou. This is not just an iwi story, this is our story, and we're doing it together. Tēnā tātou.
So I find it very hard to follow a Toastmasters champion. So these principles that Kingi has been talking about and those values are embedded in everything that all the contractors do. So right from the designers and the consultants right through to our procurement and our contractors as well. So Kingi and the co-governance group are meeting frequently with the designers and making sure that those values are incorporated into all of the design from top to bottom. So going back to why we're undertaking this project, so with the Provincial Growth Fund, they of course have some overarching objectives for the whole of New Zealand. So those are mostly around jobs and that private investment coming back into a community. So with our project, we've done a whole lot of research to come to a conclusion around what this project, the impact that this project will have. So we're looking at a potential of 133 jobs and the potential of 68 million in investment, which are set over 13 development sites over the whole forest. So there's some pretty big numbers in what the impact of this project can have. There are, of course, objectives that we have as a community and we have as a council as well, and those are around making sure we've got that active environment for our residents, making sure we've got some great infrastructure down there as well, so that it's safe, that it's a great place to play, that we've got that easy lifestyle, we've got those opportunities in the forest. Now, Long Mile, taking you through some of the designs of Long Mile is actually really quite hard because it's actually a really long mile and it's hard to get that onto one page. So I've just got a sample image here, and it's very engineering type drawing. It's the entrance way coming off Rotorua Road down to the where the dog park is there. So what you can see here is some really good off-road walking spaces. So at the moment, as you go down Long Mile, a lot of people walk on the roads. It's fairly unsafe down there. Great infrastructure around lighting at night as well. Formed car parks. More car parking's been added, so we're looking at an additional 50 to 70 car parks down Long Mile alone. And just making sure that we've got some really safe crossings there for people across Long Mile. Down the other end, we're looking at some really good coach parking and turnaround facilities as well. So that's a bit of Long Mile there. When we go up to Forest Hub 2, so right now at Waipa, we've got some real high demand out there. On the weekends, it's mostly full. So we're looking at that alternative location into the forest. So up Rotorua Road, we've got past Okaraka Loop Road, we've got what the locals call the Black House on the left there. On the right, there's already the felling of the trees happening there, and people are already parking in there already. So you get 20 or 30 car parks in there already. So similar to Waipa, we've got toilets and shower facilities, great opportunities to tell those stories in here, and some potential for those development sites in there as well. So similar to Waipa, where we invest in infrastructure, along comes the private investment to move alongside with it. Up here we've got around 200 formed car parks, lots of event spaces as well. Around the play space inspiration stuff down into the visitors centre. So under the visitors centre, we're looking at putting in some really great play space activities. So a lot of the feedback that we received through the long-term plan was talking around how we wanted to stay here longer, more opportunities to play. So building on a lot of those values that Kingi was talking about, building on all of the values that people already enjoy in the forest around hut building, around climbing on logs, real natural type play space in there underneath the tree walk. So this is just some of the inspiration images coming from the designers. So just some of the sketches that are coming through around what it potentially could look like, and sort of just a reminder that these are really high level concept drawings at the moment. We want to go through a lot more design detail with lots of children, get them engaged into what do you want to see in there as well, and actually sort of play with that and work with a lot of the children and the local community to make sure that the play space is designed for them. So really just high level drawings of what the play space could look like underneath the tree walk. There's another example here, another direction. Some great spaces to climb up on top of structures and look down onto the forest into spaces that don't necessarily have to cost you money. Just around the visitors centre, some of the images coming through around the inspiration from the designers. So again, just working heavily with those values that we don't have as much of a footprint in there in terms of the impact on the forest, that the visitors centre sits in and nestles within the trees itself so that the trees take precedence. And then we've just got some of the images coming through around what it could potentially look like. Just down at the visitors centre at the moment, we've got double the numbers in there in comparison to the size of the visitors centre that's needed. So at the moment in summertime, they are actually The customer services down there are processing people outside of the visitor centre because there's too many people. So we need to make sure that we've got a space in a visitor centre that's suitable for the numbers coming through there, but also, again, telling those stories, those real opportunities to tell those stories right there before they go walking around into the forest. So just another image there of what a potential cafe could look like into the forest. Opportunities there to picnic, bring your own lunch down, or purchase something and stay longer as well. So just what's next in terms of the forest. So we've gone through an EOI process to select some contractors, and we've brought it down to 4. We got some really good numbers of contractors willing to be part of this, and I think it was probably around the Provincial Growth Fund announcement that got a lot of those contractors excited. Tenders close at the end of this month, and that's for Long Mile and for Forest Hub 2. So not on the Visitors Centre or in the play space. That's going to continue that work around there. So really Long Mile is looking to start in February of next year, depending on what those tenders come in and say. We're also working through the Provincial Growth Fund contract with MB out of Wellington, and we're looking to bring that contract back to you on the 13th of December. So that's it from me. If you have any questions on the forest project, willing to take questions
On the forest. Could I just ask one about uplift? We did talk about the potential for uplift. Is that not included at this stage?
I think the philosophy we're really taking, as Portia said, is for us to focus on getting the infrastructure right, and then for the opportunities for others to take advantage of that. So whether it's up at Forest Hub 2, there's, if we get the basic infrastructure right, the car parking, the toilets, those spaces, then there's the opportunity for others to come and say, actually, we see this is something we want to invest in. So it's not something we would see as public money, but I think we're creating the opportunity.
First, then Peter, then Councillor Stewart.
Madam Chair, thank you for your presentation today. Concerning the Red Stag side, concerning the Long Mile Drive side, and concerning the Lake Okirika side, and I noticed that the council's putting in 7.5 million, and it's been matched by the government at 7.5 million. What are the time frames for each of those sections to be completed by, please?
So we're looking for Long Mile and potentially Forest Hub 2 to be complete by the end of next year, with work to start on the Visitors Centre and the play space in the following years. So potentially looking at a 3-year time frame around all sites.
Thank you. Peter, Councillor Bentley. Sorry.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. How much involvement are you having with, or how much discussion are you having with Scion? As I understand, Long Mile is about to become their preferred entrance, and are they contributing to it financially?
We have had discussion with Scion right from the start of this project. So there are a lot of discussions going on around that. We are, because they're looking at turning their entranceway onto Long Mile as well, so we're making sure that the Long Mile can actually accommodate that. JP may be able to update you on recent discussions around the car parking.
Your Worship, just adding to what Portia has said, we've had quite extensive conversations with Scion at a management level, and for a while we were sharing designers for the road, just to make sure that the plans for the entranceway would integrate successfully into the improvements along Long Mile. So we've done a lot of work together. We're working very closely because obviously the Scion campus is treated very much as a community recreation area, as is the forest. So some of the parking discussions we've had, particularly around that area which is used for the dog walkers, has been very important. And obviously we've had the new trail put in across the Scion campus for cyclists and walkers as well. So we've been talking with them quite extensively, and they're certainly assisting us with some parking options in and around the visitor centre within what I describe as their campus, but also being very clear about how we have to manage their entranceway and the potential to improve coach parking and turning. So just to reassure the councillor, there has been quite extensive discussions with Scion.
Okay, Councillor Sturt.
Thank you, and thank you, Kingy, Portia and Henry, for your report. I note with that image there, the wood first concepts are being incorporated in that design, and I applaud that. I just want to know, similar to some of the other questions and misunderstanding that's out there in the community, is the visitor information that you're depicting there. I think that is a key element of the whole concept. Is there an opportunity for a public-private partnership, for example, CNIE and or commercial interests, to extend that so it includes an interpretation area, a theatrette and retail and information space all in one, so that we do it once and we do it right and we do it properly, so that we then in 10 years' time we're not coming back for add on this and add on that and more burden on the ratepayer. So I just wondered what your thoughts were in that space.
The short answer really is absolutely, in terms of public-private, and again applying probably that same philosophy. We see the core public role, if you like, to be about the visitor information and supporting them in their visiting the forest, but absolutely the clear potential to attract private investment in there, whether it's eating, drinking, information, whatever. Absolutely, and we see that, in our minds, again, it's concept at this stage, but see the potential for almost a modular kind of development where you can design the whole, but parts can be built by others. So certainly see the public-private as being underpinning this.
Councillor Kent.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you. Thank you for your presentation. My question relates to the entranceway to Long Mile off Tarawera Road. I've raised the issue before, and looking at that schematic diagram, I didn't see any difference to what I saw before in terms of the entranceway. I still have major concerns. If you're going to have all the traffic going to Scion at various times at the commencement of work hours and so on, I can see traffic back right up to the Tarawera roundabout. So I want to know what sort of provisions are being made to actually calculate the likely throughput of traffic going in and out, both in north and south, because currently you've got one lane up Tarawera Road and one lane down. The rest is all cycle lanes and parking.
I hear some mutterings about whether that's Stavros, but JP can answer that.
I will bravely make some comments about traffic management, and Stavros can correct me with a mint in the back of the head if I'm wrong. Councillors, it has been quite a significant discussion. We've commissioned Opus to do a significant amount of modelling and also to consider the proposals for the redevelopment of that Tarawera roundabout. So NZTA are looking at that, so obviously the implications there on that corner, and with the recent developments that are underway now, there is a concern about what that creates as far as traffic implications in that intersection. So the way that designers have come back is that just to make sure we've got some clear turning lanes, so they have integrated what's being proposed for the Tarawera roundabout into the decisions that have already been made around those current developments at that intersection, but also to extrapolate it back up Tarawera Road. So that's why we've kept Opus in the mix there, because they're critical to understanding the total picture. So I think your concerns have been acknowledged and certainly been built into us using a single designer for that roading solution that integrates all of those areas together.
And a nod from behind. Councillor Rotorua.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you so much for your presentation this morning. It's rather exciting, and look forward to seeing it completed. But my question is, you know, when you're putting the designs together now and the sketches, Henry, have we got some young people involved at this early stage? You know, because a young person's lens is quite different to an older person, and I would really love to see them come in as early as possible, so they're helping to shape it as well. And they obviously will be some part of the storytelling in the future too. So I'm just wondering if we can get some young people in as soon as possible. If they're not already there, they may well be assisting you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Can I just add that, remember when we had the exhibition in the Galleria from Linmore Primary School, that was all about the big moves and what did they dream to see there, and they have been captured by council staff. So I'm sure there's more there. Portia?
Yes, that's definitely the next step. So we're looking to gather together a whole lot of young people and do a whole lot of engagement around what they would like to see in that space and make sure it's included into the design and the detail.
Thank you very much, and I just hope that we will get them in sooner rather than later, because sometimes they're just presented with a great idea that they can nod to, and we don't capture some of the innovative thinking that young people do have. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you so much for the presentation. And my question is probably for Henry. Henry, with whom does the business opportunity for the cafe lie?
Really, whoever's interested. Fundamentally, we are dealing with a privately owned forest, which has obviously been made available to the public. So it's a combination of discussion really with landowners, with us as forest managers, with iwi as mana whenua, but the process will be open to look at the best options.
Thank you, Your Worship, and Morena koutou, thank you very much for your presentation, and welcome, Kingi. It's great to have you here. If you don't mind, if you could just flick back to the partnership principles. The questions that I have this morning is just around the environmental impacts and also potentially the procurement processes of any commercial opportunities. I see there in the enriched life force and spirit, and you've mentioned sustainable, long-lasting social and environmental outcomes. The last time you presented, I discussed the idea of potentially having an environmental impact analysis, because at the end of the day, we've got a beautiful asset. And yes, while we do want commercial growth, we need to ensure that we're protecting the environment. I'm a regular user of the forest myself, and I encourage all of our locals to get in there as much as they can. But it's very noticeable about the bark, for example. That's one practical, tangible impact that we're seeing right now. And so it's just simple things like that, like ensuring that we have that impact analysis so that we can assess what the damage is now and what the potential damage could be with the growth, so that we can mitigate that and make sure that we minimise any risk for that. And alongside that, I think is also a very unique opportunity for Rotorua to help to promote what we're really good at, not only manaakitanga for our people, but also looking after our environment. And commercial social responsibility is probably the new buzzword for what we call that, which is a value that we've always done, but something that we need to incorporate into our business practices. So commercial responsibility, I think, would be key to be asking for in any commercial procurement process of any entity that goes in, whether it be a cafe, even our own eyesight, to make sure that we're not leaving behind anything that could damage the environment, because at the end of the day, this asset is going to be for future generations. So just to recap, question on whether there could be environmental impact analysis or just something to make sure we mitigate risk. And then secondly, is there an opportunity within procurement process to make sure that we're putting these principles into practice?
And I think the quick response is yes. We see these principles as underpinning all the process from design right through to procurement. So absolutely. And we're in I think we talked about it back when we were talking about co-governance models for the forest. We've got an interesting and almost unique situation in terms of the governance of this place, where where any one of the parties to the governance arrangements, be it the landowner, be it forest managers, be it iwi as mana whenua, have the ability to say no to anything, really. Any one of us can say no. So the exciting challenge for us is this is a really cool partnership, and so everything that goes ahead in there will be based on a partnership approach, because that's actually the only way we can make things work.
Councillor Hunt, I'm just aware too of, we've got the lakefront next, so questions first. Did you want to?
I'll be really quick, Madam Chair. Thank you very much for te rao ngā pātai. Councillor Tepsel, I think you've hit the nail on the head, as it were, because for so long the view of humanity is that the forests belong to us, as opposed to the other way around. No te ngahere tātou. We are from the forest, and so we belong to the forest. So these are the values that we need to, these are the stories that we also need to be putting in, that we need to be telling as well. Not just the story of Tokorangi and Tāne, but the story of Kaitiakitanga, the story of Manakitanga, so that, because we need to find ways to start teaching people to look after the forest and the relationship that we have. And Raj, in terms of your kōrero about the cafe, I think also the wind that blows through there is also the way, is also the Manakitanga, that is, whoever gets the cafe, the service strategy, the Manakitanga strategy, also needs to be reflected there as well.
Thank you. Councillor Hunt.
Thank you. Mine's a bit more pragmatic, really. It's really following on from Councillor Tapsel's issue of sustainability. And Kingy, you mentioned the size of the building not being dominant in there, and I wondered, was there a sense of how big the modules could be before you got to the point where they actually became dominant, to preserve that, and how you'd manage that, and also whether things like a green roof were considered, and again with the tree leaf litter, green plants may not be suitable, but whether for water conservation, and whether triple glazing had been considered, because it is in the middle of winter, it is very cold in the forest, and just from making it a completely sustainable green building, here's our opportunity. There's enormous push in that direction, and I'd really like to know that we took all those opportunities. So have they been, and I appreciate they do add cost to it, but also they save further down the track in operation. So I just wondered.
Yes, these are definitely concepts that will be included within or considered within the buildings. It's very hard to give you more detail now because we're really at those early stages, but we will definitely come back with a lot more detail around some of that stuff you're looking for.
We'll move on to the lakefront, but I just point out that in the pamphlet, we can all see that it's quite a high-level schema, really, proposal, and now we're getting some real flesh on it, and perhaps that's why some of the public didn't quite get it to begin with, but it's an ongoing iterative process as this keeps evolving. So could we move now to the lakefront, and thank you very much, and Kingy, thank you for your cultural perspective in there. Some of us have never heard it, and it adds value to the story and our understanding. And could I also welcome the Lakefront Advisory Board who are here today to hear the next presentation on the lakefront. And is it just Portia and Henry? Right.
Okay, so moving on to the update on the lakefront development project. Just before I start into a couple of the slides around some of the new design that's coming through, I just want to refer to this image here and just a reminder that it really is that high-level concept. It's one of those images that was done right at the start of our design detail. And I think there's probably a little bit of misunderstanding around what was included in this image and what wasn't. It's an aerial view from sort of at the top of the Sound Shell building, looking down towards Sulphur Point, and it's the detail that we've been working on. So it's the stage 1 and stage 1A, and I'll take you through the staging. But what you don't see in this shot is the playground because it's out of view, and you also don't see in this shot where the ticketing offices and the food and beverages. So just taking you through that shot there. So why are we undertaking the Lakefront Development Project? So back to the Provincial Growth Fund objectives around jobs and private investment. So a lot of the research that we've undertaken through part of our application, there are a lot of sites that sit around the outside of the lakefront site, and they've sat there for a long time, either empty, undeveloped, waiting for redevelopment, with resource consents against their sites as well. But really, these developers have been saying we're not prepared to invest when the quality of the lakefront is looking in the state it is. They're saying if you invest, then we're prepared to invest as well. So that's where the 305 million in public and iwi, private and iwi investment come from. That's where that number comes from. Those are those sites that are sitting around the outside of the lakefront going, we'll go if you lift the quality of this. And of course the 470 jobs that come from that investment as well. So we also have our own council and community objectives as well. It's about making sure that we've got great places to play. You know, what is out there that is great for visitors is also just as great for our locals and our residents as well. So just taking you through some of the staging that we're working on. So you can see stage 1 there is the site outside of Pukeroa's spa site that's currently under construction. This is the end that is fairly easy. It's not as complicated as some of the other details, so it's something that we can get underway and get designed and under construction while we're working on some of those other sites. Stage 1A, why are we working on that site as well, is that we've got a lakefront edge at the moment that has been damaged from a lot of the storms over the last couple of years, and we really need to work on that lake edge. So that's why stage 1 and 1A are together, working on some of that detailed design. Down into stage 2, that's where all the car parking is. So we're going to start to move into the design around stage 2 and putting a lot more car parking into that area. Stage 3 is where the playground is. So where our current playground is at the moment, that's going to have the new playground constructed right next to it. There's $1 million put aside for the playground itself, so we're talking a substantial destination type playground, the type of playground that other cities have as well. You know, that one that creates those memories for our children. Next to the playground is the toilet, so we've got a brand new toilet facility going in there, fully accessible for adults and children, disabilities, type of hoists, and in there for changing facilities as well. We don't have one of these toilet facilities in our district. We want to make sure that the lakefront's really inclusive for everyone down there. Down into stage 4, again, another area around the outside of the park that can be worked on, and that stage is actually quite easy. We've got stage 3A and 5 are the complicated end of the lakefront. It's the end which has got a lot of the activity in there. It's got a lot of stakeholders that we want to make sure we get around everyone and that we're accommodating for everyone's needs. So just some of the images that are coming through, we're starting to work into some of the design on the playground. So these are some of the stuff that the designers are drawing inspiration from. So a real range of playground types there. So we've got the temporary stuff that you open the doors and it changes every month or every 6 months, something to bring the kids down and see something new. We've got that natural play that they can get involved with. The bespoke stuff that's really unique building on all our cultural stories and can tell stories through play. And we've got the real systemised stuff as well that you can get up into towers and get onto slides. Again, just some of that playground inspiration that's coming through, just showing you the quality of the playground that we're working on. We'll also be, similar to the forest, is we'll start to work with those young people now and make sure that their views are incorporated into the design and that they get what they want to see out of this new playground. This is just some of the designs that are coming around down the end of the boardwalk. So this is what they're calling the weighted end, down the end of by Sulphur Point. This is a real contemplative type space where you can get down into the lake and dip your toes in, or you can sit there and reflect. It's the quiet end of the lakefront. Really strong structure and a bold statement down that end. So what's next in terms of the lakefront work? So you'll see that some of the work is going to start to get underway for removing the scout den in the next month or so. The removal of this building, of course, it's got the asbestos in it as well, but the removal of this building is really going to leave a really great space there, which you can picnic and get down there and get down to the lake edge. We're also working on completing that Stage 1 and Stage 1A detailed design, and we've got the work underway on the parking analysis and making sure we've got enough parking down into Stage 2. We've also got that work that needs to get underway soon with the young people around the playground. We've got a cultural impact assessment underway at the moment after completing our ecological impact assessment and our visual impact assessment. So really making sure we've got all that detail in the background before we go forward into any of those other stages. We're also working on the Provincial Growth Fund contract details, and we'll be bringing that back to you on the 13th of December. So that's all I have for the update today. If anyone has any questions.
Have to leave. Are you happy? You were first to indicate, Charles, if you go first and then...
One small question, because I think the tenure of the questions have been about, and I think this is where there has been some misunderstanding in terms of the petition as well.
We're not talking about
I'm not going to debate the petition, but the collaboration between all parties. For example, I absolutely love what you've done here in Tātou Tātou, because it allays a lot of the myths in terms of the view that the playground wasn't going to happen and that we're going to have less car parks, etc., etc. But the question I've got to ask about collaboration, there's a spectacular opportunity at the Ohanimutu entranceway to collaborate with iwi and the trustees of the marae and the formal meeting house of Te Arawa to create something there that is quite spectacular. So I just wondered whether that is occurring. And the other thing is, there was a letter to the editor stating and putting some doubt over the ownership issues in terms of being able to go in there and do this work. And I just wondered whether that been looked at, and can you comment on that for us, please?
I was wondering if it would be okay if I flicked it across to Gina, who has been working with the community down at Ohanimutu.
Kia ora tātou. There were a number of items in that particular question. The first, in respect of the entranceway, you'll see from the staging that that's a little bit further down the track. We recognise we need to work particularly with the marae trustees, but also with the wider community at Ohanimutu, and we're committed to doing that. We've put it at a later stage in the process to allow the conversation to happen and to get really good agreement with the community there around what they want to see. In respect of the ownership issues, the land is properly held by council on behalf as a reserve. There is a gifted reserves protocol that applies across that, which is binding on council. That provides that Rotorua Whata Trust are the representatives of Ngāti Whakaui. There is an extant treaty claim in respect of part of the Lakefront Reserve. That is a claim against the Crown. So what we have already done is we have written to Te Komitinui o Ngāti Whakaui, which is the mandated representative for treaty claims generally, and assured Te Komitinui that nothing to do with the lakefront development will be used by council as a means to impede any future settlement discussions. So whatever happens in respect of this development will not be a basis for the council to impede in any way future discussions.
Okay. Councillor Donaldson and Councillor Kent.
Thank you, Worship. Through you, thank you for a great presentation, busting a few myths there regarding the percentage of iwi benefit to be derived from the project. My understanding also regarding the playground is that the existing one remains until the new one is completed. When I was down there during engagement around the LTP, a lot of feedback from people patronising the playground, so that's good. But my question is regarding the funding agreement that you touched on at the end, and it's probably a question for JP, because when Minister Jones addressed the Regional Growth Forum earlier this year, he specifically referred to this project and he said that it needed to show quality and pace. So, JP, will those messages from the Minister be included in KPIs in the funding agreement that's brought to us? Will we see that demonstrated in the funding agreement that's brought to us on the 13th?
Again, just using the short answers, absolutely. What we've been required to do. So we're working quite closely with MB at the moment and their officials to create that funding agreement. And again, what they expect to see in there is a view of the phasing of the different projects. And so a significant amount of work has gone into looking at how we can undertake the lakefront whilst also minimising the disruption to our local community. And also importantly to the operators who currently have businesses on the lakefront. So that's been quite important to this process as well. So in repeating again the question you asked, yes, that there is an expectation around pace and we are working carefully with them on how we incorporate the phasing into a contract.
Kent.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you. Can you confirm, please, the planned toilet facilities will also include changing rooms and showers, as any modern lakefront or beachfront should have?
Yes, this is something that is being considered at the moment into that design, but also some of those changing facilities could occur down closer to the lake edge, down where the whare waka is as well, down into stage 5. So definitely some opportunities to include those in the design.
And Councillor Gould.
Yeah, thank you for your presentation today. With your figures, which was shown earlier in your slide presentation, you showed that 305.7 million is from new investment. You also state that 40% by iwi. Does the 40%, which equates to about 122 million, is that relating to the U Hotel or to other parts as well as the U Hotel and other parts of iwi investment? First question.
So that's triggered by the 11 development sites that sit around the outside that are in iwi ownership. So yes, in terms of the Rotorua Whata site, but also there are other sites as well.
And the second question is, with the playground at the moment called the Harold Holmes Playground, is it naming rights going to be transferred to the U Playground, or is it going to have U totally brand new naming rights? As
you'll see in the playground slides that I showed today, we're really at the early stages at the moment. So we will be considering and going back over those stakeholders who were part of the original playground to have that discussion.
Thank you.
Could I just pick up that is an important issue in terms of legacy that I think should come back to council, because these were great place shapers in our district. Thank you for bringing that up. Councillor Bentley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've got two questions. This 40 million in total investment in the lakefront, 20 of which is councils, or roughly 20. Is it your intention to show a budgeted percentage of return on that investment? That's the first question.
JP.
Through Your Worship, one of the requirements of the Provincial Growth Fund is the government's expectation of seeing some ongoing economic impact. So with us having done some analysis of the potential of investing in the public domain, creating private investment, the government is keen to track that, and so they are interested in identifying where that external investment is coming from and where it's going to, and also the potential leverage in the way of job creations. So one of the key aspects of the contract we are proposing to bring to you on the 13th of December, councillors, is that it will include not only a phasing discussion, so that sets out the expectations around how the project will be unfolded and those stage gates for funding, but also identify a number of key performance metrics that the government is interested in seeing reported on an annual basis. And so for them, we've had to identify a sort of a precinct around the lakefront so that we can actually track the amount of private investment that is going into those areas, hopefully reflecting the $40 million uplift on the lakefront. So those key metrics are being identified and will be reported not only to council but also to MB.
Thank you. And my second part of the question was, how is council going to fund this? Is it going to come entirely out of new borrowing?
Yes, Councillor, that's all laid out in the long-term plan. So for levels of service uplift, Council's approach has always been to use borrowing where we've lifted levels of service. Renewals are taken out of rates revenue, and growth is also tends to come out of borrowing, though we are looking at development contributions going forward. So all of that is spelled out within the long-term plan.
Portia, I have a question about mobile caravans and the responsible camping. Have we got a designated area? While Councillor Kent was talking about the ablution block and the toilets and the showers, that's another bit of infrastructure thinking that we have to have about whether this is a zone that we say is for caravans or not.
We certainly haven't at the moment, and I think going back to the management plan discussion, I think it left it open. If council chose to designate areas, it could, but no, not in the plan on the lakefront at the moment.
And that would come back to council, wouldn't it? Because I'm very aware with the responsible camping report before the minister that there's zones in there, so we would have the right to work collaboratively about whether it's a green zone or a red zone. Great, thank you. Councillor Kumar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just in case I've missed it, what happens to someone like Archie's? Do they get relocated or do they?
Yeah, look, it's hard to get too specific about the individual operators, but with all of them, including Archie's, they've got an existing licence or lease with us, and the terms of those leases will be met. I think most of them run through to about 2022 or 2023, and yeah, so we'll meet the terms of those leases and be thinking into the longer term about what we need as well. But I think, again, in terms of the reserves management plan, I think it was indicated that, you know, the concept around affordable food was an important one for the lakefront.
Yeah, sorry, just supplementary to that because while I do feel for the small operator there, I'm just wondering because if $40 million is going to be spent on there, suddenly if a new outlet was going to, I mean, I don't know if that would reflect that $40 million setup. So I'm just, that was my concern. Thank you.
There appear to be no more questions, but I have got a question because this pamphlet, while it was concept and proposal, we're obviously here with the advisory group getting more on this as we go. How are we going to inform the community? Because as Councillor Sturt said, a really good article in here that's like the next stage on. How do we keep the story going in front of the community?
Probably fundamentally, I think the most obvious way is to take the discussion we've had today and turn it into something that the community can access easily. So we need to build some good communication around where we're up to now.
And Your Worship, just adding to that, and certainly the advisory group has been particularly strong on making sure and asking the question of us that we have a very detailed communication strategy in place, just so we are keeping our community up to date on what's happening. So there's a number of specific actions that form part of that strategy. We meet regularly with the operators down on the lakefront, so they are kept abreast of what's happening as far as design and developments are concerned. We're also looking at making sure that within each of the different zones on the lakefront that there's specific information available there. So as we start developing up the concepts for the playground, obviously putting information boards down there next to the current playground is really helpful for people who engage in that space to see what's coming. So there's general communications and then there's specific around locations, but also to our wider community. So we're working through making sure we've got a coherent communication strategy just to support that, just to make sure that we don't end up in a situation where people are left not understanding what's happening on the lakefront.
Thank you. A new question of the presentation? Yes, certainly. And then we're going to have a 5-minute break.
Okay. With your comment of 470 jobs on your screen, from what I can understand, from what I can see, a lot of the new jobs will be at the hotel, but some of those jobs will be existing jobs where tourist operators will keep their existing staff, and the 470 will be in that particular area. Am I right in thinking that or not? Or are you talking about 470 brand new jobs?
So the 470 jobs is calculated in terms of what they call direct and indirect jobs. So there are jobs that are created from the construction of the development sites, and then there are jobs that are within the development sites. And those 470 are calculated all around those 11 development sites that sit around the lakefront. So new jobs, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Thank you to the advisory group and the petitioners. It will all be taken into consideration before we meet on the 13th. So we'll now adjourn for a 5-minute break. Thank you, councillors, and for understanding to having to leave. So we move now to recommendations from other committees on page 17. Do I have a move? Can I just say it first? A mover and a seconder to receive the report, that the report for the recommendations from other committees be received. Thank you, Councillor Gould. Seconded, Councillor Kent. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, carried. Now we'll go through them individually. The first is a mover and a seconder that the recommendation of the Strategy, Policy and Finance Committee, here it comes, held on the 8th of November, recommendation 1, the Child Equity Programme. Thank you, you move. Seconded, Councillor Hunt. Is there any further discussion? Yes, Councillor Bentley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm seeing this, and I've talked to a lot of people since we had that meeting where this subject came up, and I see rather this is more of a social aspect, and it really falls in the lap of the central government, and I think that this council should be putting pressure on central government to ensure that projects such as this one is undertaken from that perspective. And also I think that there is quite a few volunteer groups like Big Brother, Big Sister and Kiwis Can that are sort of doing very much what the council's intention was for this one, and are we running the risk of undermining their voluntary work, and could we not support them and grow their input with our support, but more importantly pursuing the central government issue as a priority.
Before you speak, Councillor Hunt, that this was about starting to develop a child equity program with other partners. There's no decision yet before it comes back to council, but we have been advised that the 4 well-beings are going back into the Local Government Act, and this is one that we're showing community leadership on, and I take your point. I think it's a very valid point. There are plenty of really wonderful philanthropic initiatives. We had one launched, or one here the other day, and held it in council, and there are many that if we link up on this program, we're going to make substantial difference. So it's just showing leadership to get those other players together. Your points are well noted. If we can involve them all, what a difference we'll make in our child equity program. But nothing's come back to us on it yet. This was, agreement to move to develop a partnership approach. Councillor Hunt, did you have?
Thank you. I'm not sure if everybody read some of the local government information coming through, but one of the most recent ones, and I can't remember whether it was the Solgum one or the LGNZ updates, but essentially the headlining story was exactly on the move into social because of the 4 well-beings being instituted, and the importance of programs like this. And so local government around the whole country is now recognising that actually it isn't just something we leave to central government. These are our communities. We have the ability to facilitate change at a direct level, and the more decentralised it is, then the more successful it is. The more centralised it is, then the more one size fits all, and the less it actually works, particularly for us. So we are in a facilitatory role at this point. We will, of course, bring in all of those, and it was the roots of empathy that we had here last week, and they're very keen to work again with Sunset Primary. So we're following a fairly well, I wouldn't say trod path, but certainly a well-oiled operation that has been in Hutt for 7 years. So while we're not replicating, we certainly know that another council around the country has made significant social changes in their community by this exact sort of child equity program, and it is come at a really good time for our community, and it has put the focus in the very places it needs us, for us to work with central government, of course, but to wash our hands and expect that they're going to pick up all these pieces, I think is outdated thinking, and certainly it's not the thinking of local government. And the head of local government, Dave Cull, if you read some of the stuff on the literature that we get sent.
Raj Kumar, then Dave Donaldson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I actually applaud any local decision from council initiative for such a partnership. My only concern is two. One is that we don't become vulnerable to having families that could abuse this system. I mean, I don't know if I've put it right, but I wouldn't like to see the system being abused for anyone's benefit. And I'd also like to see if Fordlands is the only low decile area that needed assistance in Rotorua, and whether there were other areas that could significantly benefit as well.
And if I answer, there is no system yet. They're working with a willing partner who wants to work with us to develop a program, and that will come back to council as to what it is, what it will look like, what council's contribution may be, and then it will be open for others that want to work on that same model of partnership if they're willing to and want to engage as well. So the potential is there, but we need to wait till the paper's brought back to us next year on what this program is going to look like. But you're right, those are the things we should look out for.
Significantly, if I can just add something to it, and this probably may not be true, but because it's being in business and I see it all the time, some of the social issues that that kids face from when they're small and when they grow up is why they turn violent. So if there's a good child equity program or support for everybody, then maybe we won't see such violent.
I think the program that Councillor Hunt was mentioning here, that we sponsored their annual event, was Roots of Empathy, where babies are taken into classrooms and the babies are the instructors, and that is breaking the cycle of violence. Amazing program, but schools only take it up if they wish to, and they present here, and it's quite a profound experience. And for those of us that know it well, it's the 9th year we've had the annual event here, but all of you can't come to see it. But those are the sorts of initiatives and others that could be in this program. Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Worship. I support the comments you've made and those of Councillor Hunt, but I also note the questions raised by Councillor Kumar, and there are other areas of low decile need in the community where people feel that they don't, young people aren't included in our society. But this is a pilot, and it's run through a school, so there'll be checks and balances around the appropriate support is going to the appropriate young people. It's not just violence, it's not feeling included, and then that leads to a sense of hopelessness, and that's why one of the reasons why we have a high suicide rate amongst youth in New Zealand. So it is, as Her Worship and Councillor Hunt have said, it's about being prepared with a pilot and a model to access whatever funding may flow from the discussions between LGNZ and central government around more devolution to councils. It's called localism, and if we're set to go with that, then we're in a good space to be far better off in terms of lifting those in need in the community so that they feel included. They have opportunities to access all the things that kids should as they grow up, and if we can just steer one away from committing suicide, for me, I mean, that's fantastic outcome from this initiative, so I'm fully in support.
Councillor Tapsell.
Thank you, Your Worship. And just briefly in summary, and I completely acknowledge Councillor Donaldson's views on that as well. But I do also want to acknowledge Councillor Bentley's concerns, and I know there will be some in the community, because it does appear to sit outside of the scope of our services, of our core services. But essentially what this is, and there is a reason why we included pilot in it as well, is it is a pilot program, and it's a program that will ensure that those that are most vulnerable in our community can access our community facilities. So it's focusing on the community facilities. It's covered within the Local Government Act. As Councillor Hunt said, it's been a big push, including wellbeing as well. So just to assure those in the community and other councillors that it's only focusing on support for council community facilities and the wider support that the rest of the community, in partnership with other organisations, can help with too. So just want to rest assured that we are still staying within our scope of services that we provide within council, and it's a very exciting project. We're starting with Sunset, but the ripple effects of these benefits could be quite significant. Looking at the outside areas of Rotorua as well, thinking about the Rotoiti School, the Kaingaroa School, and other areas of deprivation, and the amazing things that will come from this for those children that otherwise do not have any access to the services that we provide.
Yes, and in conclusion, I think, because there were no more questions, for me, we've had a 3-year term of looking really at infrastructure that supports growth. And this is about putting people back at the centre of our community. And I think that is about time. So I was very pleased to see a paper come to us. We've got to do the other things as well, but we must make sure that we're looking after our community. So there doesn't appear to be questions. I'm going to put the motion. All those in favour that we implement a pilot child equity program. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary? You wish your vote recorded against, Councillor Bentley. Thank you. A mover and a seconder for the motion, earthquake-prone building identification process update and decision on priority routes. I'm not going to read the whole of the rest of it. We had a very good presentation here. You move, Councillor Donaldson, seconded, Councillor Hunt. Is there any discussion? Councillor Gould, were you there for the presentation? Yeah, cool.
I was there for the presentation, but I'm a little bit concerned with the word high pedestrian. Now, I know we got a presentation about buildings built after 1975 and buildings built 1935. I just want to point out that we've got a high-rise building in the city which is built pre-1975 in the 1960s, which has got a lot of tenants. The other issue is if you walk around the CBD, you see a lot of buildings with pre-1935, built 1931, 1926 on them. And I'm just saying, have we protected ourselves enough, or have we got issues involved with that?
Well, I think we need a technical answer, but I see it in the statement. Henry. So, could you answer that, Henry?
Yeah, and look, it might be easiest just to give a slightly broader answer as well in terms of what the point of this resolution really is about. There's a requirement on local authorities essentially to identify routes which may be really important in terms of getting people out of places, and to look at those routes and see if they're surrounded by or have buildings on them that are potentially going to cause some issues in the case of a disaster. So all this is really saying is, look, in terms of the priority routes, we've got no need to essentially classify them and then take different steps with regard to the buildings, because one, there aren't the buildings, and two, there are plenty of routes to get out. So moving down onto specific questions about specific buildings isn't the point of this resolution. It's quite a technical resolution in terms of meeting our obligations to identify where there might be priority routes, and it's saying, look, we don't need to do that for those reasons.
That was the tenor of the presentation, so I think we're asking beyond the scope of this. So we need to seek assurance. Are we covered? And this resolution says yes, we are. Councillor Kent, I don't think you heard Nevin, did you?
No, unfortunately I wasn't able to attend the presentation, but I had just one question for clarification in my own mind. Does this apply only to the CBD in Nangahau Village? Because, for example, the immediate thing that springs to mind is we've got one very high-profile building which is largely unreinforced masonry and very high pedestrian count called a museum.
Well, I think you can answer that. That's another story.
Yes, and that's right. But again, Councillor, you're down to the specific building issue, which is part of the role we've got to play, but it's not in relation to this particular resolution around the priority routes.
Thank you.
Sought. I'm going to put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Contrary? Carried. We move to recommendation 3, the alcohol ban bylaw deliberations and adoption. That the attached alcohol ban bylaw 2018 with attachment 1 be made in accordance with the Local Government Act 2002, that the new alcohol ban bylaw 2018 will come into force and take effect on the 22nd of November, and that the Public Places Liquor Control bylaw be revoked on the 22nd of November 2018. Is there a mover? Thank you, Councillor Kent. Seconder, Councillor Donaldson. Are there any questions or discussion? There appear to be none. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary? Carried.
Madam Chair, can you record my vote as not taking part, please?
Thank you. We will note accordingly. We move to recommendation 4, the temporary liquor ban NZME Radio Limited ZM Float Music Festival, Flotilla 2019. Do I have a mover to accept the motion? Councillor Hunt, seconded Councillor Donaldson. Is there any further discussion? There's none. I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Contrary? Carried. And now a mover and a seconder that the following recommendations of the Resource Management Act Policy Committee meeting held on the 8th of November be adopted. Recommendation 1, request to approve appointment of Independent Hearing Commissioner for Plan Change 5, signs and miscellaneous changes, that Independent Hearing Commissioner Greg Hill be appointed. I won't go through the section.
I move that, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Seconded. Councillor Donaldson. Is there any discussion?
If you like, Madam Chair, I'd like to just speak to that briefly, to the reasons that we've reached that decision. Essentially, the focus of one of the submissions to the signs bylaw relates to the impact of the proposed rules on political signage. And in order to make it completely transparent and there be no perceived bias about the decision making, the appointment of an independent commissioner means that it is decided by someone, Mr. Hill here, Mr. Greg Hill, who has considerable experience around the country and is nationally recognised as an expert hearings commissioner. So he will be hearing those submissions and making a report back, and the committee were unanimous in their decision that this was the best way to go, and we'd very much like the support of council for that.
Thank you for that clarification. Are there any further questions? There appear to be none. I'm going to put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Contrary? Carried. Now the staff reports the schedule of meetings, and you've all got page 55, but you've all got the latest version on your desk, and have you not? Yes. Yeah, you have. So go to this. Could I have a mover and a seconder that the report schedule of meetings 1st of January to 31st of December be received? Thank you. Councillor Lord, seconded Councillor Donaldson. And could I just say, before we put the motion to the vote, I was very pleased to hear that Democracy also works with regional council and try where they can not to get overlap, because that's a challenge actually. So thank you for working collaboratively there. I can put the motion to the vote, or do you want to speak to it, Una? No. Are there any questions? There appear to be none. Yes. Yes.
Likewise, I think it's unavoidable that some councillors will have other commitments that need to be prioritised through a discussion with Democracy and with the chair of a particular committee that they have to get to. So I am delighted by both the recording in minutes that a councillor was absent on council business, but also to see that reporting in the annual report when the report reports on the attendance of elected members at meetings. It shows where a councillor couldn't make a certain number of meetings, they were on other council business. So I think that's transparent and it's safe for all of us.
I agree. Councillor Bentley?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Since you've raised it with regard to the councillors being away on council business, should we not expect at the very least a verbal report upon their return as to how successful they were in council business?
But I think of some of the meetings that I'm at, they're governance and strategy, and I do tend to report back when there's something that comes back. We could note that for the incoming. Yeah.
We actually do have a requirement if elected members are attending like an LGNZ conference or a Sister Cities one, and Mark will be an advocate for this, because we, as you will recall, an example is quite a lengthy report from Mark on one of his latest representation of council. And we do bring that through in terms of the council committee report. So there is a report back process and presentation of that.
I think it's good information for fellow councillors. So it is done. The only bit that wouldn't be, they keep scheduling rural and provincial regional meetings in Wellington on today. Day one is on today, so I'm missing that on behalf of council. But that's a scheduling thing that you just cannot overcome. You must make the primary call that your responsibility is to hear. Yes, Councillor Gould.
Thank you. What you've got to be careful of is confidential information, because you've got to realise that if it goes back to council, it gets published in a public capacity, where sometimes some of those items are very delicate.
Well, that is the discretion of the councillor who's participating in the meeting. I agree, and it's good to hear that from you, Councillor Gould. So do we move the schedule? All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary? Carried. Thank you, and thank you for getting it to us early. This is relatively early, isn't it? Or do you always get it here? But it helps us with planning next year. And also looking next year, it's really great if we can now look at our own leave to try and fit it in around these weeks. That's why it's a bit of a heads up, and remembering there's the election in October. So we need to plan to have some time with your family. Great. Now I have a resolution to go into public excluded. There are 3 items for consideration: adoption of confidential minutes, the wastewater update, and the Chief Executive Performance and Remuneration Review. So the reasons for confidentiality are commercial sensitivity and to protect a person's privacy. Do I have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Hunt. Seconded, Councillor Tapsell. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary? Carried.